For almost 500 years, they were the superpower of the East, an empire forged by nomadic horsemen that grew so powerful it brought the mighty Roman Empire to its knees. This is the story of the Parthians.
So, let's just think about this for a second. We all know the stories of the Roman Empire, right? The unstoppable legions, the endless conquests. But what if I told you there was another power out there? An empire that drew a line in the sand and told Rome, this far and no further, for almost 300 years.
And this was that empire, the Parthian Empire. At its peak, it stretched all the way from the Euphrates River, deep in what's now Iraq, right to the frontiers of India. I mean, look at that location. It made them the absolute gatekeepers between the two great worlds of the time, Rome in the west and Han China in the east. So where on earth did this powerhouse come from? Well, their story doesn't start in some grand ancient city. Nope. It begins on the wide-open steppes of Central Asia, with the tribe of nomadic warriors.
And their rise to power was just incredibly fast. Around 247 BCE, this tribe, the Parni, led by a brilliant chief named Arsacid, they saw their chance. The huge Seleucid Empire, which was a leftover from Alexander the Great's conquests, was starting to crumble from within. So Arsacid just swept in, and boom, by 238 BCE, his Arsacid Dynasty was born. Then, under legendary kings like Mithridates I and II, this little kingdom just exploded, swallowing up huge territories like Mesopotamia and Media. And it wasn't long before everyone, including their rivals, had to admit they were a power equal to Rome.
Now, you don't build an empire that fast without one heck of an army. And the Parthian army, well, it was something the Romans had never really seen before. For a Roman legionary out on an open field, it was the stuff of nightmares.
What you're looking at here is a complete clash of military philosophies. Rome's whole strategy was built on its infantry, those disciplined, heavily armored legions that were like a walking fortress. The Parthians, on the other hand, were all about the horse. Their entire way of war was built on speed, hit-and-run attacks, and just total maneuverability. It was a fighting style born on the open steppe.
Their army really had two killer components. First, you had the Cataphracts. You can literally think of these guys as the ancient world's heavy tanks. I'm talking horse and rider completely decked out in heavy armor. Their whole job was to deliver one single terrifying charge that would just shatter an enemy line.
And the second, and probably the most famous, was their light horse archer. These guys perfected the legendary Parthian Shot. And it was just pure genius. They'd charge at you, then suddenly they'd pretend to retreat. This would trick the Roman infantry into breaking their tight formation to chase after them. And just when the Romans were disorganized and exposed, the Parthian archers would, at a full gallop, twist around in their saddles and unleash a deadly storm of arrows into their pursuers. The greatest showcase of this terrifying strategy came in 53 BCE at the Battle of Carrhae. One of the richest and most powerful men in Rome, Marcus Licinius Crassus, decided he wanted some military glory, so he invaded Parthia. He didn't find glory, he found total annihilation.
20,000. That's how many Roman soldiers were killed at Carrhae. Another 10,000 were captured. Crassus himself was killed, and the sacred golden eagle standards of his legions were captured. For Rome, this was a national humiliation that would sting for generations.
Which really brings us to the big question, right? Why? Why could Rome, the conqueror of pretty much the entire known world, never manage to land a knockout blow on the Parthians?
Well, it really boils down to a few key things. First, their cavalry was just perfectly built for the wide-open plains of the East. Second, their empire was decentralized. You could sack their capital city, but it wasn't a fatal blow because power was spread out. They would also just bleed Roman armies dry, hitting their supply lines with guerrilla tactics. And finally, there was this weird stalemate. The Parthians were masters in the field, but terrible at sieges, so they could destroy Roman armies, but they could never really take and hold Roman cities.
But the Parthians' strength wasn't just on the battlefield. They were also some of the most brilliant economic masterminds of the ancient world.
I mean, they were literally sitting on a gold mine. They were right in the middle of the Silk Road, the main highway for trade between China and Rome. Every bit of silk, every spice, every precious gem heading west, and all the rum and glass and gold heading east, it all had to go through them. And by controlling that flow and charging tolls and customs fees, they became fabulously, unbelievably wealthy.
And you know, being at the crossroads of the world like that didn't just make them rich. It also created this incredible, one-of-a-kind, blended culture.
Parthian culture was this amazing cocktail of influences. They loved the Greek or Hellenistic culture left behind by Alexander the Great. Their early kings even called themselves friends of the Greeks, but at the same time, they were fiercely proud of their Persian heritage, using the ancient title King of Kings. And all of this was built on a political system that was still, at its heart, based on their nomadic, feudal origins.
But after nearly 470 years of incredible power, like all great empires, the cracks began to show.
Those centuries of constant war with Rome, it was like a slow-acting poison. Even though Rome could never conquer them, the endless invasions just took a massive toll. Their capital city, Ctesiphon, was sacked by the Romans 3 different times, and each time it drained the empire of money, soldiers, and prestige.
So in the end, they were getting hit from 2 sides. They had these endless, draining wars with Rome on the outside, and on the inside, constant civil wars between their own powerful nobles. The combination of the two just fatally weakened the ruling dynasty.
And the final blow? It didn't come from Rome. It came from within. In 224 AD, a rebellious Persian governor named Ardashir rose up against the last weakened Parthian king. He defeated him in battle, and just like that, the Arsacid Dynasty was over. Ardashir founded a new dynasty in its place, the Sasanian Empire, which would become Rome's next great enemy in the east.
So the Parthian Empire was gone, but its way of war, its culture, its political structure, it was all passed down to the Sasanians. Even the Romans adopted some of their tactics, which really makes you wonder, doesn't it? Does an empire ever truly disappear, or does it just change form?
I really hope you enjoyed this deep dive into the empire that stopped Rome in its tracks. If you did, and you want to see more stuff like this, you know what to do. Subscribe to the channel, give this explainer a like, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the next one. And hey, let us know in the comments what other piece of history you'd like us to unpack. Thanks for watching.